Hello, my name is Samsonov. I'm a graduate student in the University of California in Los Angeles. And today I'm presenting a project called The Fragmentation of Views in a Democracy. The research questions are as follows. We know that media are oftentimes politically biased. This may happen either because of direct control of the media, by some interest groups, or this may happen because media want to become more popular by being biased. Nevertheless, media are biased. It is interesting, though, that people do trust biased media. So contrary to what we might expect, bias does not decrease popularity. And even more interestingly, this happens even though alternative sources of information exist. To give an example, Russian state TV is quite popular. This is the most popular news source for Russians. Nevertheless, it is very biased. And it enjoys its popularity even though independent media exist as well. Fox News in the United States is one of the most popular types of cable news still, despite it being very biased. And despite there being multiple other newspapers or cable news. So why do people trust biased news sources? And why do some people trust them and some not? Moreover, it's interesting, why do media become biased? Is it just because someone powerful owns them, or possibly for some other reason? There is quite a lot of good literature on the topic. The workhorse model for such questions is Bayesian persuasion, which was developed by Gelbach and Sonin and by Genskov and Kamenetsa. Main idea in such models is that a certain media outlet or propaganda agent can commit to report some degree of truth. For instance, it can hire people with certain views as editors or journalists, or it can have some policy of partial censorship. Empirical Rosanes and Stukal show that Russian state TV does report objectively on economy. The problem is that they always attribute good news to President Putin, and they attribute bad news to certain foreign forces or to luck. My paper explores the following gap in literature. Why does competition from other news sources not reduce the bias? And why does the bias not reduce the popularity of media outlets? The outline of my work is the following. First, I present my theory in words, then I talk a bit about case studies, and then I provide a game-theoretic signaling model. So here is my theory. Politicians may share exclusive information that they have with some media outlet. For instance, they allow the journalists to interview them or to see how their party or government makes decisions. So they give the media some information that the media would like to publish in order to attract consumers. However, in exchange, the politician expects favorable coverage. I show in the model that citizens who like the politician sufficiently much will read the biased media and will make their voting decision based on these biased media. On the other hand, the citizens who don't like the politician will be attending to some unbiased and independent media, even though these independent media have less information. The first case study is Fox News, and more specifically the Fox News host, Sean Hannity. So as Kwong writes, Sean Hannity basically has a desk in the White House. And as Meyer shows in her article in the New Yorker, Sean Hannity maintains constant contact with the president. That is, he has numerous interview opportunities. He does spend a lot of times in the White House, and he accompanies President Trump during certain business trips. So Sean Hannity is strongly conservative, and he is a strong Trump supporter, and he has been even attending the Trump rallies before Trump became president. Despite there being such a biased journalists in the Fox News remains one of the most popular cable news channels in the States, and Sean Hannity's show is one of the most popular TV shows. So it's important to note that Sean Hannity or Fox News are not simply yes men. Fox News does criticize the Republican Party or Trump himself. And there was even an instance when Sean Hannity criticized Trump over not securing enough funding for the border wall. So hence, because there is some criticism on Fox News about Trump, voters may perceive them as being informative and not just someone who praised the president all the time. So why are Fox News biased? Meyer has found that there was a sale of assets from Disney to Fox News, from Fox News to Disney, which raised concerns for monopolism and still was not stopped by the administration. So this is an example of material favors. Still there were no examples of material favors from Trump administration to Fox News that we know of. Hence, it is probable that covering Trump in a very favorable way is a good strategy for Fox News to attract viewers and raise advertising revenues. My next case study is the Freedom Party of Austria and the popular newspaper called the Kronenzeitung. So the Kronenzeitung frequently interviews people from Freedom Party, even though I was unable to find their interviews in other newspapers. And as certain political scientists show, this coverage by Kronenzeitung has increased the power's ability to win elections. So we do not know of any bribes or the material favors that the newspaper received from party members. So similarly to Fox News, Kronenzeitung is one of the most popular newspapers in Austria, maybe the most popular. Similar to Fox News, it is sometimes critical of the Freedom Party. So it seems like there is a symbiosis between the party and the newspaper, whereby the party allows the newspaper to interview themselves. In exchange, the newspaper covers them in quite a positive way. It is also noteworthy that the Freedom Party is trying to suppress other sources of information in Austria. For instance, the Interior Minister, Mr. Kickel, who comes from the Freedom Party, sent an email to the police recommending not to share information with critical media outlets. Moreover, the Freedom Party advocates defunding the public television. Hence, it seems that the party wishes only to preserve the media which are favorable to them and suppress other media and make them more informed. We'll show in the model that if the politician is less transparent, if it shares less information with independent media, then she persuades more voters to vote for herself, and the media that she co-opts becomes more influential. My final case study is Russian state TV. So here, of course, the TV is under government control. There is a lot of direct censorship and self-censorship. Nevertheless, I think that certain effects which I described regarding Kronenzeitung and Fox News, they are relevant here too. So the Russian state TV has a very strong pro-government bias, but it's still popular. And I think that an important source of its popularity in recent times is its ability to cover the boiling points in Donbass and Syria. After 2014, Russian public opinion became more concerned with foreign policy, especially these two places, Donbass and Syria, where there is a war. And the state media is able to send its journalists there. On the other hand, for some private independent media, it's very hard to send journalists into these places. For instance, there is a story of a journalist who was kidnapped in the Donbass, and luckily he survived, but it shows how dangerous it is for such journalists to go to Donbass. As for Syria, I don't know of any non-government journalists who would go there. So why is this all relevant? It seems that Russian state TV has exclusive information about Russian foreign policy that independent media doesn't have. And hence people still watch Russian TV because it has a monopoly over this kind of information about foreign affairs, even though that Russian state TV is biased and there are some unbiased sources around. So my final case study is Germany, and it shows how things can work differently. So there, the popular media are more critical of the far right and offer them less space than in Austria. And the German far-right party, Alternative for Germany, fares worse in elections than the Freedom Party in Austria. Why is that? Based on my model, I suggest that the reason is greater government transparency in Germany. So based on the Center for Pluralism and Media Freedom for Austria and Germany, the two countries have much larger level of government transparency. Level of government transparency is much higher in Germany than in Austria. Hence, the politicians cannot co-opt media by allowing them to get some exclusive information, because there is just less exclusive information because government is more transparent than in Austria. So let's try to formalize this argument in a game-theoretic model. In a model, there is one politician, two media outlets, and a continuum of voters. A politician supports a certain policy, say the expulsion of migrants, or putting a harsh quote on how many migrants the country can receive. And there is a hidden policy relevant information, say how dangerous are the migrants, how many crimes do they really commit. The voters don't know this information. The voters usually don't know much, but they can learn about this information from the media. The politician knows the information exactly because she is a politician, and she has access to all sorts of statistics. And we assume that the media observe the information with some probability. And with some probability, the media just observe random noise. The politician agrees to share information with one media outlet, but the politician proposes that this media outlet in return becomes biased in favor of the politician. A voter must select only one media source, either dependent on the politician or independent, and make her voting decision based on this. So formally, we start with the information structure. There is a pair of relevant state of the world theta, which is uniformly distributed on the 0-1 segment. The voters are located on the segment AB, where A is greater than 0, smaller than half, smaller than B, which is smaller than 1. So voters form continuum on A and B. Each media outlets observe a noisy signal SI, where the probability that SI equals the state theta is P, and the probability that SI is equal to RI is 1 minus P, where RI is some uniformly distributed random noise which is not correlated with other variables. So to reiterate, with probability P, the media gets the signal which is equal to the state, and the probability Y minus P, media just observes random noise, but the media doesn't know whether it observes random noise or the state. It just knows that it got this signal SI. The politician always observes theta, and each media outlet has to make several decisions. First of all, each media outlet has to select some threshold SI, such that if the signal SI that the media receives is higher than the threshold, then media outlet sends message equal 1 to its readers, and if SI is lower than the threshold, then the media outlet sends a message of 0 to the voters. So I assume this binary message structure for simplicity, and it also corresponds to a simple cheap talk model where the media hire a journalist who then sends cheap talk messages. However, for the lack of time, I leave it out of this presentation. So a politician chooses threshold TP and proposes to share information with outlet 1 if it accepts TP as its threshold, where the threshold plays a role I just described. So what happens next? Media outlet 2 observes whether outlet 1 agrees to the politician's proposal or it doesn't. If the proposal is accepted, then outlet 2 selects some threshold T2 in response. If not, then both outlets select their thresholds T1 and T2 simultaneously. After that, voters decide whether they read outlet 1 or 2, or they read none. And we assume that they read no media outlet if indifferent. So notice that if the voter is sufficiently extreme and the 2 thresholds are very far from her, then maybe the voter prefers to vote, say, 1 or 0 all the time. So there is a possibility that these media are just useless to her. So in the end of the game, the state theater is realized, messages are realized, voters vote, and policy is selected by majority. So here are the payoffs. The probability that policy is equal to 1 is the payoff for the politician. So the politician just maximizes the probability that voters select alternative 1 no matter what. For the media outlets, their payoff is the audience they get. That is, it's the mass of votes which decide to read them. Finally, for a voter X, the payoff is theta minus X if policy equals to 1 and X minus theta if policy is 0. That is, if a voter expects theta to be higher, then she becomes more inclined to vote for 1. If she thinks that theta is smaller, she wants policy 0. And if X is larger, she prefers policy 0 more. If X is smaller, she prefers policy 1 more. I propose and follow an assumption. It looks a bit scary, but I needed to ensure that if outlet 1 discards the politician's proposal, then there is an equilibrium in which there exists a unique equilibrium in which both media outlets put their thresholds in the middle of the segment, which is A plus B half, A plus B over 2. The intuition for this is quite similar to the median voter theorem. And we can see that this assumption becomes stronger. If this assumption is satisfied, then it is also satisfied if we decrease A and B, if we increase A or decrease B, or if we increase B. That is, in words, this assumption means that A and B are sufficiently close to each other, that voters are not too extreme, and that the independent media gets the truth with sufficiently high probability. So again, I'll reiterate the timing before I proceed to results. So the politician proposes agreement TP to outlet 1. Outlet 1 agrees or not to set its threshold to TP and receive the information about theta. If outlet 1 disagrees, then outlets 1 and 2 sets some thresholds T1 and T2 simultaneously. If outlet 1 agrees, then outlet 2 observes TP and chooses some T2 in response. Then voters observe the thresholds and decide what to read. Finally, state theta and signals SI are realized, media send the messages, voters observe these messages, and then they vote. So here are my results. First, an agreement between the politician and a media outlet is always happens, and it always leads to some bias. So voters who are more supportive of politicians or the politician will read outlet 1. Other voters will read outlet 0, outlet 2 always vote 0. The bias decreases in the amount of voters who strongly oppose the politician, increases them in the amount of voters who strongly support the politician, and the bias decreases in how informed are the independent media. This graph shows how the equilibrium looks like. So here is our segment AB. Here is where the voters live. This segment 0, 1 is the support of the random variable theta. So generically, outlet 1 will choose some policy TP, which the politician proposes. From here to here, everyone will read outlet 1 and will vote 1 if the message is 1, and will vote 0 otherwise. Everyone on the right of this value will do something else. They will either read outlet 2 and vote accordingly, or they will always vote 0. Here are some comparative statics using graphs. So here is a position of voter who most opposes a politician, that is B, the right endpoint of the segment, and we see that it increases TP, the probability that co-opted media reports bad news about the politician. So if you can see, let's look at TP again. If theta happens to be above TP, then these are good news for the politician, because it means that theta is large and voters should vote 1. If theta is below TP, then it means bad news for the politician because voters vote 0. So hence, if TP is larger, then it's worse for the politician because theta ends up above TP more rarely, and it ends up below TP more often. Okay, so similarly, we can see how the position of the voter who most favors the politician affects things. So the position of voter A who most favors the politician again increases the probability that the co-opted media report bad news about the politician. So here is A. If we move A to the right, then TP always also moves to the right. So there is a bigger probability that voters learn that theta is below TP. So finally, this is the probability that non-co-opted media, the other media, get a correct signal, and this is a probability that co-opted media reports bad news about the politician. So again, this is quite intuitive. If the non-co-opted media have a more accurate signal, then more people read them, and few people read the co-opted media. So the co-opted media must reduce their bias in order to get a sufficiently large share of the population. Okay, so that's my presentation. Thank you. And please feel free to email me comments and suggestions. Thank you so much.